52 episodes, 52 ordinary people, 52 real stories about things that affect overall health. Because there is a lot more that goes into being healthy than food and fitness. Inspiration, support, a new perspective, and knowledge. You'll find that and more here on the Healthability Project.
Welcome to the Healthability Project. I'm Robin McKenna. I'm honored to have as my guest today a man who is going to share his story of the effects of war on his health and well-being and what is helping him to heal decades after his experience. John Melillo is an oil, contemporary, realist painter on all surfaces. He grew up on the East End of Long Island. He is also a disabled Vietnam veteran who uses painting as a solace and healing mechanism. Much of his art is inspired by his East End heritage. His art is geared to detail and storytelling. John has been featured in many TV appearances, including CBS on Veterans Day, Newsday, and News 12, most recently teaching art at Van Gogh Immersive to other veterans. Coming in November 2023 is part 3 of his series, Life Goes On, his solo art and video exhibition at Southampton Cultural Center in Southampton, Long Island, New York. Thank you so much for joining me today, John. I am so glad and so honored to have you on my show.
Thank you, Rob, for having me.
So, John, if you could take us through what your service in Vietnam was like and how long you served, what you saw, what the other men were like, and just the impact it had on you?
Well, I think my experience, one thing about Vietnam, it affected everybody differently. I mean, I meet people today that were accountants, that worked in the offices, and it affected them. Vietnam affected everybody, no matter who you were and what your background was. As far as my service goes, I graduated from Cornell University in 1969, and within a year I was drafted. I was in the last draft of the year, and I went in and I started in flight school. That didn't work out. I wanted an MP school, Military Police Academy, and I went to then Vietnamese language school and then over to Vietnam. And when I got over to Vietnam, the one advantage I had is I knew all the pilots because I trained with them, and I knew a lot of the MPs because they were there 3 months ahead of me because I went to language school. So I got to kind of find out what the best duties were, where I needed to be. And I wound up in Long Binh, Vietnam, which was the biggest military installation in country. And I just, at that point, I was a private. I just want to do my 2 years, do my service, get out and go back to my life. You have to realize something. I'm 23 years old with a college education, and I'm looking around and seeing, I'm with 19 and 18 and 17-year-old kids that some of them never wore shoes before. So,
wow. Oh my God.
So we lost, in my unit, we lost one guy, and one guy was wounded, and it was from lack of supervision. And you have to know, I was at the very end of the war. So there was a lot of apathy going on both sides, certainly a lot of at home, and certainly even in the military, because nobody wanted to be there. You were losing a war. The United States doesn't lose wars in any event. Because of lack of supervision, I feel we lost one guy got wounded. So I walked into the first sergeant and I said, look, and their attitude is, we did in Korea. So what do you want? What do you want from us? Because I said, if you make these changes, it might have a different effect. They said, okay, you do it. So they made me a sergeant. I said, fine, I'll do it. So I became patrol supervisor on this post. Now, what that involved was I had 26 guys working 12-hour shifts, 6 weeks days and 6 weeks nights. And we had to handle 12 guys work gates, 12 guys work patrol, and I had 2 dog units. And we had to handle anything from civil to combat involving 60,000 Vietnamese and 40,000 GIs.
Wow.
I mean, every day was an adventure. It was just, at the end of the war. Plus, what was bad about that is it was the end of the war. The Vietnamese were slipping in tons of drugs, just to demoralize the troops. The Vietnamization of war was going on, so all these guys were drawn on the post. They're getting Dear John letters, and certainly that was that created a lot of hostility, suicides. I don't want, it was just, it just was an adventure. It was something, and my job was to keep the guys that I had under my control safe as best as my ability. So it kind of put me out there front and center. But it also, because I was front and center, because of the job that I had probably the power of, they always say my job had the power of a 2-star general, because nobody wanted to fool around and get a bad service record, particularly with military police. So it allowed me to do a lot of things for my people, and for even to save lives on both sides of the fence, of Vietnamese, as well as gave me that power. And certainly in my guys, we exercise that power to the best of our ability.
You must have had a tremendous sense of responsibility, not only to your own guys, but maybe to the local people?
Sure. Oh, no, absolutely. No, my crew, we were all together. We were together to save each, you fought for the guy next to you. That's how you got through that. The ideal was not there in that war. So you fought with the guy next to you, you fought to get home to mom and apple pie. And you also, the Vietnamese are beautiful people. I'm telling you, I don't care, they're all trying to do the same thing we all try to do: be successful, raise their children, have a happy life. So that's where my series led me, and Life Goes On, because I take pictures that I took from Vietnam and I paint them with the stories behind them. And certainly there was a lot of shock and awe, and that was a lot of what the war was about. But I don't paint that. I paint the Life Goes On series, meaning, how people, when the bombs are bursting in air and when tragedy is going on, people still have to live. And I found my pictures reflected that, which amazed me, because I'd never looked at them till 50 years later. And it just turned out that, historically I'm painting them, and hopefully they'll be archived someplace.
It's interesting that these paintings that you took while you were there are part of such a painful part of American history, but you have converted some level of serenity or beauty to it, because you're capturing, life has to go on even amidst the worst of humanity, right?
Right. Yeah, but you know what? You see a lot of things. Realize something when you're dealing in extreme situations like that, particularly, you walk inside a post, you're in the jungle, for crying out loud. There's some attributes that if you open up your mind, there's some real advantages if you look for them, no matter where it is. I don't care where you are. If you look around you, you'll find things that are that stand out. And for example, we're animals. Okay. In other words, when you get in situations like I was in, reaction has to become synonymous with thinking, or you're going to die. I mean, there's so many things that happen to you. There's so many situations you come. If you don't, on a split second, make the right move, you're not going to make it. Now, so my question to you is, what's the thought process of me raising my arm? There is none, because thinking becomes synonymous with reaction. And under that premise, you usually do always the right thing, and you survive, and you survive very strongly. Another interesting thing is your sense of taste, your sense of smell, your sense of, there's a mongoose. I don't even know what a mongoose is, but I see one running across. I mean, it might be imprinted in my brain that I read somewhere, but all that comes alive. Your adrenaline's pumping 100%. And now some people animals smell it in two ways. They smell it as being nervous, which is what it can be, anxiety, or they smell it as not being scared. And that's how, and you function very calmly and smoothly, almost like you're on some sort of an amphetamine, because even in extreme situations, you're in a peaceful, you have to be in a peaceful place for yourself in order to do the right thing, in order to survive, and in order to let this reaction and synonymous thing take place.
So you were able to finish your 2 years, you got out, you came home, and you began your life. And I did see the piece about you on CBS 2 News. And I recall that you had mentioned that it was much later in your career where you realized you were suffering from PTSD and then you turned to painting. What was the pivot point for you? How did that all unfold?
Well, what happens is this. First of all, you have to understand something. We came home to an ungrateful nation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was just, in one word, it was hostile. In other words, I remember seeing an Oakland Air Force Base being drummed out. It takes about 3 days to drum you out, debrief you, whatever you want to call it. And there were 300 guys in an airplane hangar, 300 cots. Orderlies come running through hysterical because the weatherman, which was an American terrorist group, just blew up the barracks next door. You just came up. Well, what's all this about? You know, the Army gives you $2 silver and tell you go on with your life, you know, because you lost the war. They don't want to part of you. It was very difficult. You went to the VA. It was nobody wanted any part of you. Matter of fact, coming out of the service, they said, don't wear anything distinguishing that you were in the service because it might not be safe. That's how stupid this whole thing was.
That had to be so painful too, though.
You know what? It's not as painful what I just lived through. I mean, it was nothing compared to what I lived through. So, you know, it was just what you want to do is get on with your life. And that's what I drilled down to. So to answer your question, your original question, I came home. I immediately said, I want to get on with my life, which led me to New York City, down in the financial district. And I ran a New York City race for 45 years. And I never looked back, never looked at the VA, never looked at Vietnam. I just ran this race for 45 years. Matter of fact, I remember going to events with my son and they're saying, is anybody a veteran that'd like to stand up or come forward? And I'd be sitting there and my son would be poking me saying, Dad, you're a veteran. I forgot. That's how removed I was from it.
Wow.
After 45 years and I retired, I didn't realize that all those things that I had seen and all those things that I had witnessed, all that running and all that effort that I put into work was to mask some of the things that I had experienced in Vietnam. And all of a sudden it hit me. It hit me 45 years later out of nowhere. I'm having not only nightmares, I was having daymares. And I really didn't know what to do. So I went to the VA. Now the VA, let me preface this. The hostility and how weak they were at first, it's a different story today. Actually, they're very receptive, particularly to the Vietnam guys. There's many programs, there's many positive things. The VA is actually excellent and they're wonderful. They have so many programs involved in so many different areas. So what they did is they did an evaluation. They went through my record, did an evaluation. They said, John, for what you saw, you've got an extreme case of PTSD, whether you know it or not. I said, really? That's what's going on. So I was in New York City and I started doing all these different types of psychological programs, prolonged exposure, one-on-one type of situation, group therapies, all kinds of things. I did that for about a year and a half. And at the same time, they gave me a vocational abilities test. That was part of their process. Mm-hmm. And the results came, when the results came back, they called me and they said, John, look, here are the results. If you take a hammer and you try to nail a nail into a piece of wood, don't do it. You're going to lose your fingers. However, if you want to be in salesmanship, which is what I did for a living, or if you want to be in the arts, artist, actor, director, you're at the top of the food chain. You're in the 1 percentile. I said, really? I never drew a straight line before that. So I said, all right, I'll bite. With their help, I enrolled in the New York Academy of Art, enrolled any place I could. The School of Visual Arts, they put me through. I got business certificates out of Christie's and Sotheby's, took courses at the Met, New York League of Long Island, of not only Long Island, but New York, Salamundi's, any place I could find art. I figured I'd jump in. I was goal oriented. I figured jump in the deep water. And I took all these things. And something happened to me that I didn't realize was there. In so doing, I became good at it. I just, which just amazed me. And creating, being able to create and being able to put something down and concentrate and absorb what I was doing and was like a third act for me. It became a third act. It was a gift from God. There's just no question about it. If anybody, he saw I needed help and there it was. You have to understand something about PTSD. By the way, I have Agent Orange and a few other nasty things going on too. But you have to understand something about PTSD. It's something you can't heal. You just have to learn how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Now, what's good about my career in painting and all that and getting the attention and being able to do solo shows and different things like that, I come now in contact with a lot of different veterans who are in the same position I was. Some of these guys are being dragged in by the wives because they saw me on TV or in a magazine or something, and they don't want any part of it. And I understand that. They don't want any part of it because they remember what I remember, and that will never go away. And I feel bad for them because I know the pain they're living with. But in some cases, it opens up. I've had guys that the wife said, he hasn't faced this in 45 years. And because he met you and because he sees that you're facing it, he's now taking a different approach. And that's rewarding. But what's really interesting, Robin, which amazes me, is I come in contact with all kinds of people, not only veterans. And one thing that manifested itself to me that I wasn't aware of before is PTSD is a global situation. We all have our Vietnams. You understand? Be it a death in a family, a bad relationship, an accident, an illness. How we survive them tend to define us. So they say 1/3 of the whole population of the world has had some sort of an instance where there was a gravitating experience that they have to deal with even to this day. So now it becomes global. And so PTSD is not just Vietnam, not just war, not just veterans. It's 1/3 of the population at least. So, my message now as I run into all these people is the same thing. Look, the way you have to deal with it is do something good for yourself. Find something you like to do. If you like to sing, join a choir. If you like to read, join a book club. You like to paint, take painting classes. You like to dance, join a troupe or take dance lessons. Do something that gives you some self-worth, gives you accomplishment. And in so doing, like for me, it's a sense of me dealing with my infirmity, and it's certainly a sense of dealing with them. So my message now is global, and it's more than just to veterans, and it's very rewarding, additionally rewarding for me to pass that on and see the results.
That is fascinating. As far as the wives that bring their husbands kicking and screaming to your art shows and things, I mean, that's great. Do you see, is it mostly Vietnam veterans, or do you also see some of the younger guys who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan?
Well, I see some of them, in the classes, I see some of them. I had 3 of them in the Van Gogh, and I like to mix it up because, when I was in the service, it was really men. It was 99% were males. And I said, I want to see, when I do these events, I say, I want to see women. I want to see men. I want to see Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, Coast Guard, even give me the Peace Corps. Give me those people who really went to arms way. I'm sorry, your question was again?
Oh, I was just curious to know if you see veterans, the younger veterans from the more recent conflicts.
We do, but you know what? I don't seem to see I don't know if that has caught up to them yet. Remember something, a lot of our problems were not only, it was a hostile war, it was a hostile America. Nobody wanted any part of it. People were leaving to go to Canada. People were spitting on you, calling you baby killer. You're trapped. Your life is uprooted. So it was a different environment, I think, than other people. Now, I feel bad for the guys from Korea because you never hear about those guys. But, most are gone. World War II guys are gone. The Vietnam guys are the guys that probably faced the most hostility, not only in the war, but also coming home. So I do see guys from Iraq. I do see guys from Afghanistan. But I haven't seen it. Probably has manifested itself with them, but I haven't seen it as much as Vietnam. But I identify with Vietnam because I was there, and I recognize it just like an aardvark knows what another aardvark look like.
I also too wonder, I think it's a fairly common story that with the PTSD and those in Vietnam that it has taken veterans a long time to come to terms with that PTSD, and that maybe enough time has not passed for those that have been in the conflict at Afghanistan or Iraq. I don't.
Well, maybe they haven't retired. Look, for 40 years, I didn't even, as I say, my son spoke at me saying, Dad, you're a veteran. That's how far removed we are from that. And remember something, too. A lot of us were drafted. It
wasn't your choice.
It wasn't our choice. We went, we went because we went. But you have to know that how hostile things were. I'll give you an example. I'm in basic training. And I get a letter from my landlord going, you broke your lease, to holding your deposit. Okay, so I go to the provost marshal, which is part of the Army, which is illegal in the Army. I go in there. I said, look, is there anything you can do? Can you write a letter? This and that. And they go, well, you did break your lease. That's the apathy. You have to understand the culture that so everything was just to turn yourself. Even when I was losing these guys, the first sergeant says, look, we did in Korea. So you want to do it? You do it. I said, of course I'll do it. And actually, we went out. I tell you what, I saw guys do phenomenal things for people. I saw people risk their lives to save children. I saw, but you see so many, extreme situations. You see some things you'll never forget, and not just bad things. I mean, one of my paintings, for example, we call it the caretaker. And we used to go out in the jungle. I have this one patrol. I used to go way out in the jungle, and we'd pass this woman in a grass hut. And she'd always have kids running around there, and she'd have sugar cane that she cut, probably make a living. And you didn't go in there because it could be a VC stash of arms, could be booby trapped. You didn't bother with it. Unless it was right in front of you, you stay at arm's wave. But one day, after passing this woman about 15 times, I said, I'm going in. I want to see what's going on here. And she's holding a baby, and there's probably about 10 kids scattered. Didn't want to have their picture taken, but I took a picture, and I got about 8 of them with smile. The kids are smiling. They're well dressed. That was a Vietnamese orphanage. This woman, talk about a moralizing woman. This woman took in kids on both sides of the war, took in orphans from both sides of the war, and she made life meaningful for them. She made life suitable for them. They were happy. They were well dressed. They were well fed. So, you want to immortalize things like that. And even in an extreme situation, some people do the wrong thing, but some people do the right thing. And that's where heroism comes in. That's bravery. And that woman, to me, was one of the bravest people I've ever seen. I mean, it just turns, when I think of that, when somebody says, what do you define as good? Because you learn in Vietnam, I learned words as pictures. If you said hate, I can remember a situation that is hate. If you say heroism, I remember a situation that was heroism. I put a picture on it. I put a face on it. And this would be, you see things like that, and that's how it imprints on you. And so it's not necessarily, if you, I don't care about what situation you're involved in. I don't care if it's whatever it is. It's really what you make out of it to survive, and what you do for other people in surviving, and as I say, some people do the wrong, but a lot of people do the right things. And it's very uplifting to see that type of heroics.
And how long have you been painting?
Well, I've been painting since I retired, probably about 6.5, 7 years now. Wow.
Any plans past your series 3 in November?
Well, we're doing it now. I mean, I seem to be like the flavor of the month. I mean, I'm going to be in the Fine Art Fair, the Hampton Fine Art Fair in July, which is a very prestigious show. I'm presently showing now in the Southampton Cultural Center, Articom. I'm showing, that's going on now through August. I'm going to be showing in the Hampton Library. I have the whole library, the Hampton Bay's library, for the month of November. I'm going to be showing in the Arts Council, Islip Arts Council, Huntington Art Council. Also, I'm showing right now, and I'm doing solo shows. And I'll have also a video with my daughter was a TV producer, so she produced videos to go along with these shows, or 20-minute videos, and we'll be airing them actually in the Islip in November in the Islip Art Center. Okay. We'll be showing some paintings, but we'll also be airing these 20-minute videos, which take the pictures that I actually painted and the stories behind them. And some of them are very unusual. I mean, I picked out the caretaker, for example. I painted her, and we tell that story. You would take there's things that you just, if you didn't live in Vietnam, you wouldn't you wouldn't have experienced that. I mean, I had one where, we're prepping November. Life Goes On 3, Veterans Day will be the Southampton Cultural Center, 25 Jobs Lane in Southampton. And these pictures will be on view as well as the videos. And, one of the videos I show, for example, I mean, I controlled that whole post. I mean, I had a job that and they let me. They knew I knew what I was doing and said, let them go. I mean, I handle all the USO shows. I handle Bob Hope, for example. I handle them all, security for him coming in, going out. I handle Sammy Davis Jr. I get all, I was in charge
of the job. the feel good
No.
part of a bad situation. So
It's what you make out of it. You know what? There was like you talk about saving lives, there was a rule saying if there was an action where America was involved, the Vietnamese, you cannot, and there was an injury to the Vietnamese, you have to send them to a Vietnamese hospital. That's almost like a death sentence, I would say that anytime I'd see any situation like that, no matter what it was, I personally bring them up to our triage and say, yeah, our GI was involved here. So you had many ways of saving lives. You found ways to do that. You found ways to protect other people. But but you see some interesting stories. Like one of the stories I have is on these paintings, I had this Rocky. It's a 9-foot python. And we got called out one night. I had to go off post for some reason. And you go off post, you're open season. Anybody can shoot you. So you run with infrared lights close to the ground. When running with these infrared lights, you can barely see, and all of a sudden hit a big bump. You normally keep going because you can't stop. You don't know what's going to happen. But I said, look, we might have hit somebody. It might have been even a VC, whatever it was. I go back, and it was a 9-foot rock python stretched across the road to get the heat. They get the heat. So the thing was a light. So you couldn't stay there long. If I left it on the side of the road, the jungle would claim it within a half an hour. Somebody would come. So I said, well, let me throw it in the back of my Jeep. And the worst thing I could do is come up with a nice belt and a good pair of boots. So I take it back to my bunk or wherever the tent, wherever I was living. And I put it under my bed. I said, let's see what happens. And the next morning, there it's curled up. I called it Rocky. It's curled up, bright-eyed, bushy-tail. An amazing thing. It's just stationary under my bed. For once, no vermin chewed on my boots. I took care of that problem.
Wow.
And I had a little lizard I called it Billy, lived in my pillow, and I wake up and he took care of the insects around my head. And he used to bob. I'd see bobbing using his head. So that symbiotic relationship, to conquer the jungle, you don't fight the jungle. You become part of the jungle. You become symbiotic with that, and that's how you survive. So we were one big happy family for about 3 weeks, and all of a sudden I get a call saying, John, you get back to the barracks right away. Everybody got to see it. I get back, and Rocky turned out to be a rockette.
Uh-oh.
And all these little pythons are curled up on everybody's bedpost. So I did what I could, turned them loose. Okay, I turned them loose, and I gave one to the motor pool, gave one to the engineering company, And then about 4 days later, Rockette took off. She always could. There was nothing keeping her, But think about it. She had a safe place to lay her eggs. I didn't know she had eggs. She had plenty of food source. So we all lived she took care of my problem. So, that's how you survive. And, animals and nature respect that. And you become part of that culture. And that's an amazing thing. That's the amazing part of that situation.
Yeah.
You could walk in the jungle with somebody, you could touch them, touch the back, and then you just had a conversation. So, I would say in my situation, though, as I retired and came full circle, I think finding art really saved me because, certainly I had experience. I'll give you good sides of it. I could sit here and tell you some horrors, too. But I try to use the positive side. That's what life goes on is all about. So. Right. If anybody's interested in seeing some really interesting stories, and by the way, that's only one. I probably have I think we're up to 9 or 10 paintings now, and everyone has a story like the caretaker or like Bob Hope or something like that. So just two things. Art saved me. And what I do is my heritage is really from the East End of Long Island. Mm-hmm. It's kind of where I grew up, and my family's all from here, from 1890s, Southampton, all those places, Sacaponic. So I paint the East End, and I kind of live out here too. So I do live out here. So I paint the East End, and I paint Vietnam, and I paint the East End. I paint all the places that I knew as a kid. We did family cookouts at Flying Point Beach, which is a big beach now. But in those days, there was nothing around. So shipwrecks would come in because of the tide, and they'd be there for years, and my cousins and I would play in them. So I remember those things, and I paint things that I remember. I go to places that I went to as a child. And by the way, there are places still in the Hamptons that amaze me. I go back to reminisce and to find material to paint. And they haven't changed at all. It's amazing. You can still park at the dunes. You don't need a parking permit. There's no lifeguard duty. But, there's places still that I remember my father showed me that as much as things have changed, they haven't changed at all. So it's just pretty special. And it's a treasure trove. When you talk about Long Island and artists, remember something. There's no place in this world, I don't know of any place in this world, in 15 miles, you can hit Long Island Sound and the rocky coast and the deep waters and the high bluffs, the Peconic Bay, the Great South Bay, the flats of the Great South Bay, and then the Atlantic Ocean, and all of it, and all the topographies, different topographies, and the different, and it's just a treasure trove of inspiration.
Yeah, it is a beautiful, beautiful part of Long Island, and I'm sure it's very therapeutic and serene. And what an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspective and what your takeaway was from the whole experience of Vietnam and how you're moving forward. It's just an absolutely phenomenal story. Thank you so much, John.
Well, thank you, Robin, for having me.
Okay, listeners, hopefully you liked today's episode. If so, please like us, share us, tell your friends about us, post on social media. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can reach me at thehealthabilityproject@gmail.com. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today at the Health Ability Project. We'd love to hear from you, so please email us your questions, comments, or suggestions, including future guests, to thehealthabilityproject@gmail.com. And please like us, subscribe, and share us with your friends.